Welcome to Disability Law for Railroad Workers.
Hey everybody, welcome to an all-new episode of Disability Law for Railroad Workers with Roger Driskill. I'm your host, Mike Leon. Roger here is a disability attorney who helps people secure the benefits and steady income that they deserve, including railroad workers, Social Security applicants, ERISA claimants, and federal employees. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about how railroad workers qualify for occupational disability benefits. So Roger, if I can say railroad one more time, that'd be great. I'm going to ask you though, start off, share a little bit about your background. What made you want to focus on helping railroad workers with disability claims?
Mike, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate this. I had a client many years ago who was injured as a railroad worker and came to me with a denied railroad disability claim. I helped him, found out that there were a lot of challenges in applying for railroad disability benefits, and I embraced railroad worker representation because I saw a need for railroad workers to maneuver through and navigate the disability process system with the Railroad Retirement Board. I've done this for many years. I've had some success, and I believe this is an opportunity to help people. I find it very rewarding.
Well, that's great to hear. And I would love to stay on the disability terminology and for you to kind of break it down for the audience here. So you got occupational disability. How's that different from total disability? If you can kind of explain both.
Occupational disability is a benefit available for disabled railroad workers who have 20 years or 240 service months. That is a very strict threshold. The Railroad Retirement Board does not accept 239 service months. If a railroad worker has 240 or more service months, which is 20 full years, and that person cannot perform their jobs that they've had with the railroad, then they qualify for what is called occupational disability. That is less demanding generally than having to prove total disability. Total disability is the obligation to prove to the Railroad Retirement Board that the applicant or claimant cannot perform any job for which that person is qualified by education, age, or experience. Give you an example. A person with less than 240 service months or less than 20 years of work with the railroad has been a conductor, but is under 40 years old, in their 30s or 40s. That person could be denied disability benefits if the Railroad Retirement Board believes that he or she could sit at a desk, do a telephone job, do assembly job, do cashiering work in a store, retail work, or any variety of work that's less demanding than being a conductor because they have less than 240 service months. That person has to prove that he or she is totally disabled and not just disabled from their former or own occupation.
So Roger, staying on that, then what is the Railroad Retirement Board looking for from a medical evidence perspective for this worker that is applying for benefits?
The Railroad Retirement Board, first of all, looks at your diagnosed conditions: cervical spine disorder, degenerative disc disease, major depression, bipolar disorder, diabetes, any variety of medical conditions. If that medical condition is severe and affects your ability to perform your daily activities or functions, the Railroad Retirement Board is looking for medical evidence showing that the symptoms that you report are supported by your medical records. And assume a person has back pain and the diagnosis is degenerative disc disease. The RRB is looking for MRIs, X-rays, surgical reports, epidural shots, pain medication, physical therapy records, other documents in the medical treatment record of the applicant supporting the condition that the claimant believes that the back pain is disabling. Another example, assume a person has bipolar disorder, and that person says that because of their lack of concentration, their mood swings, their inability to get along with other people, keeps them from being able to perform their task in a timely manner. The Railroad Board is looking for medical evidence of treatment, long history of symptoms, unsuccessful efforts with medication therapy, inability to get along with other people. So any medical condition or medical conditions that the applicant believes are severe and disabling have to be supported by medical records and medical tests. A physician simply saying Jim can't do his job is not enough. Bringing into the Railroad Board a diagnosis from a clinic is not enough. The symptoms, the limitations have to be supported by tests and medical records.
So Roger, let me ask you then, because it kind of funnels into the follow-up about paperwork, records retention. What else do you recommend that this worker should gather before filing? And kind of elaborate a little bit more about the point you made on the doctor's statement. Is that a crucial part of the process? You kind of said that maybe it wasn't the only factor. It can't be the only factor. You can't just show up with just a doctor's note.
If a person is considering filing for disability benefits with the Railroad Retirement Board, the first thing the applicant needs is a complete list of healthcare providers, primary care physicians, hospitals where tests have been performed, physical therapy, occupational therapy records, counseling records, psychology records. Have a complete list, and ideally with a date of treatment, or the beginning date of treatment and the last date of treatment. The reason that is the first step is because if you have had back surgery, but you don't know where that surgery was done, whether it was done in a hospital or a surgical center, or I've moved 3 times since then and I don't remember, it does no good to say you've had back surgery if you can't get the records. So first and primarily important to the applicant is a complete list. Once you have the complete list, then you can start assembling the records to determine what are the diagnosed medical conditions and what are in the records. Classically, a person might work with bad health for years. That person may have 4 or 5 medical conditions, including diabetes or high blood pressure or hypothyroidism. And then finally, they have a back injury. That person may think the back injury is a disabling condition, but the back injury may just be the tipping point, because the diabetes may affect the limbs, the hands, the legs. The hypothyroidism may affect fatigue. Diabetes may affect fatigue. And the back injury, although important, may not be enough. So the list of healthcare providers is first and second step. It is helpful to have a properly documented doctor's letter. A doctor's letter stating Jim is disabled and can't work is no help. A properly submitted letter or statement from a medical doctor needs to include all the diagnoses, the supporting data such as an MRI, unsuccessful treatments such as medication or shots or other therapies that have not worked. It's also important to note how long this doctor has known this patient. A doctor who's seen a patient once or twice does not have as much credibility as a doctor who's been treating the patient for years. It's ideal to have a good, well-supported physician statement, but it's not critical. If there are many medical records supporting the symptoms and diagnosed conditions, oftentimes that can be enough evidence.
Roger, how often or how long, I should say, does the Railroad Retirement Board usually take to make a decision? And can you kind of explain what are some maybe common reasons why their decision making gets delayed?
The Railroad Retirement Board is an overwhelmed agency. It's apparent it does not have enough staff. The staff that I deal with routinely are dedicated, hardworking, and conscientious, but there are not enough of them. If you call the Railroad Retirement Board and ask them how long it takes to process the application to make a decision, the current date is the average time limit is 480 days. On top of that, the 480 days doesn't start until the entire application is submitted, including all the documents. So the day you call the Railroad Retirement Board does not start the clock. So contacting the Railroad Board, following up with getting all the application documents, getting them completed, properly signed, submitted, and well documented just starts the time limit. And when the Railroad Retirement Board tells you that the average time is 480 days, that's the average. Many claims are resolved properly before 480 days, but the other half is over that amount. It can be a long process. Sometimes it seems like the Railroad Retirement Board has forgot about the applicant because they have not heard for months or maybe a year or more.
So, Roger, if somebody gets denied a claim, what options does that person have in terms of the appeal process?
If a claim is denied, that applicant can ask for what's called reconsideration. That reconsideration request must be filed timely. It is a request to the Railroad Retirement Board that somebody else take another look at the application. Ideally, the request for reconsideration will be supported by more medical evidence or more analysis of why the denial was improper. If the request for reconsideration is approved, benefits are paid, and the applicant will have some peace in his or her life. If the request for reconsideration is denied, that person has a right to have a hearing before a Railroad Retirement Board hearings officer who functions as a judge. The Railroad Retirement Board hearings officer or judge will allow the applicant to testify under oath, giving the medical history, the symptoms, the work history, and the other limitations that person experiences in his or her life that prevents him or her from being able to work at the total disability level or at the own occupational level. I encourage a person who's been denied on their disability application to not give up. Railroad Retirement Board people change their mind if they have a reason to. The reconsideration people are willing to take another look at the claim. And when the claim gets in front of a hearings officer, the hearings officer is not bound by prior unfavorable decisions. Along the way, more medical evidence typically comes in or supports the claim. So a claim that does not look good in June may be better in December. I encourage a person not to give up. On occasion, if the hearings officer denies the claim, the applicant can file a lawsuit in court against the Railroad Retirement Board. The objective, of course, is to win at the initial level and certainly by the hearings officer level.
Roger, let me ask you, a railroad workers listening to this right now, they think they may qualify. What's the first thing that you say that they should do in order to get started?
The first step is to make sure the person is eligible. A call to the Railroad Retirement Board will be made and make sure that the Railroad Retirement Board has all of the recorded service months from that railroad worker's work history. The process is a railroad employee is paid. The railroad employer is required to submit earnings records by month to the Railroad Retirement Board. On occasion, mistakes are made by the railroad employer or the railroad retirement board. And then sometimes income is received by the railroad worker that is not properly credited. Sometimes the railroad worker has received a short-term disability benefit or has been paid by a contractor instead of the railroad. So it's critical to make sure that the person is eligible. Let's assume a railroad worker is thinking about filing for disability and he or she has 235 service months. If a person can continue to work and get the extra months in to qualify for the 240 service months level of own occupation, and that person can work, that is something that the railroad worker can consider if he or she believes he can or she can work an additional few months. Many times a railroad worker gets into 230 service months level but cannot work anymore. But at least the railroad worker needs to know how many service months he or she has and knows what level of proof will be needed to be successful in a disability application. Once you know how many service months you have and that you are eligible, then you can inquire about getting the application documents and consider making an application. It doesn't hurt to get a package of application documents and then change your mind and say, I'm not going to pursue this. Or it doesn't hurt to make an application, submit all the documents, and if you get better, return to work or take another job. The claim that's filed today can always be dropped later if a person's health improves.
Yeah. Roger, thank you for the time and insights on this. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you for this opportunity, Mike. A person that works for the railroad has earned his or her money. Working for the railroad is a hard way to make a living on a good day. And if the health overwhelms that person's where he or she can't work anymore, the benefit for which he or she has paid for should be inquired about. A railroad retirement board benefit is like an insurance policy. You pay the premiums for your car, and if you have a damage to your car, you make a claim. It's the same process before the Railroad Retirement Board in seeking disability benefits. Mm-hmm. Thank you for this opportunity.
And thank you to everybody out there for listening to another episode of Disability Law for Railroad Workers. If you're a railroad worker right now, you're wondering about occupational disability benefits, do me a favor, visit burnettdriscoll.com to learn more and reach out to Roger and the team. Don't forget to like, leave us a review, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. As always, I'm Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.